Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are on part 4 of The Girl Who Could Fly. And so, yeah, here we go. On to chapter 10. Oh boy, it's in German. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. Anyway, 9 German. Infuriated, Professor Mumblebee had temporarily lost his English vocabulary entirely and was pacing back and forth in Dr. Hellion's office, spitting out German in such a way that his meaning was entirely all too clear. Sitting behind her desk in her large white office, Dr. Hellion was a picture of calm composure and rationality. Agent Agent stood silently behind her right shoulder like a statue, and behind him was a wall of glass through which you could see the rest of the facility. Piper, who'd been placed in the hot seat before the desk, sat on the edge of her chair, nervously waiting to plead her case, which was not an easy task with Professor Mumblebee and Nurse Toll. She had Daisy pounding the floor, Nurse Toll pitched in as soon as Professor Mumblebee momentarily paused for breath. The entire building was shaking, and now we've got structural damage on levels 8 to 13. I'm not even getting into Myrtle's clapping. Sounded like the Super Bowl. It sounded like the Super Bowl, and there's a snail with hearing damage on level 3 because of it, not to mention the others. Conrad went and pushed me out the window. I'd have died if I didn't fly, Piper hotly protested in her own defense. We don't need another Bella. This one is a bad influence. She's a troublemaker. I keep telling you that Conrad was bullying a smaller kid, Piper repeated, all too aware that Conrad had, hands down, won the battle. She'd swallowed his bait, hook, line, and sinker, while he sat back enjoying the spectacle of having her unceremoniously yanked from the classroom. It's not right. Surely you can see that. And I didn't jump out the window. I was pushed. Dr. Hellion listened to Piper thoughtfully. I demand that you send her home immediately. All at once, Piper realized that things were a lot more serious than she had first imagined. They're gonna pack me up. They're gonna pack me off home with my tail between my legs? Then what? Piper silently begged Dr. Hellion to give her another chance. Piper, Dr. Hellion interjected evenly before Nurse Toll and Professor Mumblebee could interrupt. Do you remember the discussion we had earlier today? You told me that you wouldn't fly, isn't that right? Yes, but Dr. Hellion raised an eyebrow and Piper stopped herself before she continued. Yes, ma'am, I remember. I'm glad to hear that, Piper. Now, when you agreed not to fly, did you understand that you were making a commitment both to me and this institution? Yes, ma'am. So you understand that you broke that agreement, So you understand that you broke that agreement, Dr. Hellion quietly pointed out. But Piper gulped, feeling lower than a snake's belly. I guess, well, yes, and I'm truly sorry, more than you'll ever know. Albeit you had your reasons, but Piper, you must understand that Professor Mumblebee is responsible for your safety as well as order in the classroom. If you have a problem, you must ask for help. Understand? Piper nodded contritely. Yes. I'd like a moment alone with Piper, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Hellion said to Professor Mumblebee and Nurse Toll. Reluctantly, they allowed Agent to escort them from the office, closing the door after them. I'm awfully sorry, Dr. Hellion, Piper stammered, tears welling. I'm begging you not to send me home. I swear I won't fly like that again. Dr. Hellion watched Piper closely. In the uncomfortable pause that followed, Piper shifted back and forth, waiting on tenterhooks for Dr. Hellion's verdict. After the way Dr. Hellion had been so nice to her, Piper felt just terrible for letting her down. When Dr. Hellion finally did speak, she did so in the same even tones and rational manner that made everything make sense. Piper, I am here to help you. We are all here to help you. The rules we have created are for precisely that purpose. They ensure your safety, protection, and growth. If you don't follow them, it won't be possible for us to assist you, and if that's the case, there's no reason for you to be here or to participate in our program. Dr. Hellion paused, watching Piper to make sure she was really listening and understanding. The reality of your situation is that there's nowhere else for you to go, and no one else who can help you. We're it. This opportunity is the best you'll ever get. Piper nodded, knowing Dr. Hellion was right. Dr. Hellion stood up and walked to the large glass window in her office to look over the amazing facility that stretched high above them. This is the bottom line, Piper. I have been doing this long enough to know that ultimately you can't force someone to do something that they don't want to do. Therefore, I won't try to tell you what to do or what choices to make. Those decisions belong entirely to you, and I will expect whatever path you take. Dr. Helene spoke firmly, harshly even. However, if you choose to stay with us, you will follow the rules, and that is non-negotiable. One more incident, regardless of who is at fault, and you will leave. From this moment on, if you choose to stay, you will be a model student, and anything less is entirely unacceptable. Dr. Helene turned, holding Piper's eyes in her own with a firm stare. Is that understood? Piper's body flooded with relief. Yes, Dr. Helene. Good. I'm glad to hear it, Piper. Dr. Helene smiled warmly. Anyone can make a mistake. I understand that. I'll be very disappointed, though, if I ever find out that you are willfully being disobedient. You see, Piper, I wouldn't be surprised if one day, not too long from now, you'll be standing right where I am and running this entire institute. Me? Piper was shocked. Yes, you. I see so much of myself in you, Piper. I have faith in you, and I know you'll have what it takes. Piper was deeply moved. No one had ever said something like that to her before, let alone thought it. She wanted to be deserving of Dr. Helene's high opinion and make her proud of her. That'd be swell. Wonderful, Dr. Helene corrected. That'd be wonderful, Piper repeated. You're like an innocent and naive lamb, Piper McLeod, just waiting to find your way back to the safety of the flock. I hope that you'll let me shepherd you back. Dr. Helene sighed and returned to her desk, remembering herself. Well, I think that is enough excitement for one day. I believe your classmates are all preparing for lights out. If you hurry, you won't be late. Thank you, Dr. Helene. Relieved and thrilled to have so narrowly escaped a near disaster, Piper rushed from the room before Dr. Helene changed her mind. Passing through the adjoining waiting room, Nurse told Professor Mumblebee immediately shot her dirty looks. She can stay for now, Dr. Helene stated flatly when they both came back into her office. It was clear that both Nurse Toll and Professor Mumblebee adamantly disagreed, as testified by the expression on their faces. Dr. Helene either didn't notice, which was unlikely, or didn't care, which was closer to the truth. But keep an eye on Conrad. He's up to something. That much is certain. He never does anything without a carefully calculated reason. The dormitory was on the third tier of the 13th level, and each student had their own room. Piper's room was toward the very end of the hallway and was a cozy retreat. A fluffy down duvet rested on a cushy bed. The small corner desk held a shiny white computer above which rested shelves of books deemed by Professor Mumblebee as suitable for the development of young minds. Pictures of trees and forests and brightly colored flowers complemented an overall cheerful and incredibly inviting effect. Rushing to meet the bedtime deadline, Piper went to her closet, where a fresh uniform pressed and ready for her to wear the following day. Next to it hung a gym outfit, a nightdress, and a bathrobe, all arranged neatly in a row. They were all new and perfectly tailored to meet Piper's measurements. Despite the time pressure, she paused to run her fingers appreciatively down the soft robe before quickly shedding her uniform and slipping into her nightdress. A moment later, she jumped into bed and turned off the lights. That's it. Lights out, Nurse Toll's voice boomed up and down the dormitory hallway. That means you, Smitty. Nurse Toll passed by and checked in on Piper, completing what would be the first of many night checks performed throughout the course of the evening. Good night and God bless, Nurse Toll, Piper said as he passed. Nurse Toll stopped dead in his tracks and spun around to face Piper. What'd you say, McLeod? Piper gulped, peeping over her covers at the hulking figure of Nurse Toll lodged in her doorway. Good night and God bless. It's what my ma say every night before I go to sleep, sir. That right? Piper nodded. Huh. He turned to go and then changed his mind. My mama said the same thing to me, too. An unexpected softness blazed across his face, but he ruthlessly squashed it. No talking after lights out, McLeod. That's the rules. I'm sure sorry. I can still hear you talking, McLeod. But there's no one here to say it to me. It's the first time in all my days I'll go to bed not hearing it. Piper suddenly wanted her ma and pa so badly it hurt all over. That's tough, McLeod, because you're not hearing it from me, so suck it up. But you got a problem, McLeod? You want me to call Dr. Helene for you? Piper swallowed her tears as best she could. No, sir. No problem. Glad to hear it. Now lights out, no talking. Nurse Toll waited to make sure Piper really was good and quiet before he continued down the corridor. I can see that light on, Lily. One more bounce of that ball, Ahmed or Nayland, or whomever the heck you are, and it'll belong to me. Before long, all the noise died, and the soft hum of the facility filled the air. It was the first quiet Piper had heard in what had been the most exhausting and confusing day of her life. A wave of tiredness passed over her. She'd never slept anywhere but the farm, never on any bed but her own, and her day always ended with a good night and God bless from her ma. But not tonight. Tonight she was all alone in a place far, far away, surrounded by strangers. Snuggling down under her covers, she clung to the little wood bird her father had so lovingly carved, and said a quick prayer for Bella and her ma and pa, and Dr. Hellion, and all of the other kids too. "Good night and God bless, Piper," she whispered quietly to herself. "Good night and God bless, Ma. Good night and God bless, Pa." End of chapter 10. With surprising ease, Piper settled into the routine at her new home. She discovered that she wanted for nothing and everything, from her soft bed to the delicious food was specifically tailored for her comfort, like a five-star resort, catering to the very rich and finicky. Professor Mumblebee and Nurse Toll overlooked no detail, no matter how small, when considering the kids' needs, from arts and crafts to music to the varied athletic schedule. "I can't turn this way or that without having to learn something new these days," Piper told Dr. Hellion one evening several weeks into her stay. Dr. Hellion often invited Piper to stroll in the atrium with her before lights out, and Piper looked forward to their special time together more than anything else. Dr. Hellion never granted individual time to any of the other children, despite the fact that they were clamoring to get her attention, and Piper was grateful for her attentiveness and advice. "Professor Mumblebee says that I'm pretty much the slowest student he's ever had. He says that for someone with so many grand ideas, I can't spell 'em worth nothing, and he thinks it's more likely we'll make first contact with aliens before I end up getting the hang of those multiplication tables. I could learn 'em fine, I just can't think up a good enough reason to pay them any mind. What's the point learning 11 times 11 anyways? Doesn't do anyone any good knowing such things. Besides, if someone's gotta know it, seems to me that Conrad's got that covered 9 ways to Sunday. I asked Professor Mumblebee just the other day when I could fly again, and he said it was likely to be soon, and I thought it'd be real sad, and I thought I'd be real sad, but I ain't. I mean, I'm not." Piper was trying to talk like the other children and was making progress. "But I guess that's because we're doing so much stuff I hardly have time to think straight. Did you know that Nurse Toll said I'd get to be on the trampoline next exercise class, and he's going to teach me somersaults? He sure comes off mean, but the other night when I said good night and God bless Nurse Toll, he didn't once tell me I was breaking the rules like he normally does. Of course, he didn't say it back, but I bet he was thinking it, and it won't be long before he's saying it loud as you please. I reckon deep down he wants to. You think?" Dr. Hellion considered the matter. "I don't see any harm in trying, regardless of whether he does or doesn't." Piper liked the way Dr. Hellion always spoke to her like an equal and listened, not just pretending to listen. "Did I tell you that last week in gym class when Nurse told us to get partners? Violet asked me to be her partner? She did, just like that, and she said real quietly, 'You want to be partners?' And I said, 'You betcha!' right off. No one's ever asked me before. I've got to admit I felt real special afterwards. Now, whenever there's whenever they're supposed to be partners, Violet and I just know that we'll be partners. It's comforting to have that. And we walk to class together too. And Violet waits for me to finish up in the morning and tells me not to be late because of how sore Nurse Toll gets about lateness. She doesn't even mind the fact that I like to talk so much. Ma says that I'd talk the hind leg off a donkey, but Violet says she likes it, 'cause then she don't have to talk. What she doesn't like to do is as it makes her shrink. Wasn't that nice of her? I think that makes us friends, don't you?" "I think that does," Dr. Hellion agreed. "She's my first friend ever. It's real nice having a friend. It makes you feel—" Piper thought for a moment, trying to put the right words to it. "Connected. Like someone is watching out for you, and you're watching out for them." "That's a nice way of putting it, Piper." Dr. Hellion received daily reports from Professor Mumblebee and Nurse Toll, and although Piper may not have been aware of it, she was already very popular with most of the other children, which said a lot because they were a prickly and difficult lot who routinely rejected and ostracized classmates, particularly new ones. Just the other day, Professor Mumblebee had recounted how Jasper wouldn't let Piper out of his sight, but followed her around like a lost puppy. The others were starting to follow Piper's example and looked to her for leadership too. "Do you think I'll get a letter from Ma and Pa soon? I write to them almost every other day, and I haven't heard a thing back yet. Of course, it's getting close to harvest time, and things are awful busy at the farm, so maybe they didn't get the time. That's one thing about being down here. It's like time took a holiday, and you can't tell one day from the next. I'll keep an eye out for any letter." A bell sounded on the third tier, jolting Piper. "Jiminy, that's the first bell! Lights out in less than 3 minutes. Good night, Piper." Good night, Dr. Hellion. Piper dashed off and thankfully slipped beneath her covers and switched her light off moments before Nurse Toll's form filled her doorframe. You're lucky, McCloud. You were almost late. But I wasn't, Nurse Toll, sir. I got my eye on you, McCloud. I know it, sir. Nurse Toll lingered a beat. Good night and God bless, Nurse Toll. Huh. He gruffly turned his heel and left. Piper could hear him moving from room to room as she settled more deeply beneath her covers. Something she hadn't told Dr. Hellion, probably because she didn't quite realize it herself, was that a calm had begun to settle over her, thanks to the structured and regulated environment. Her thoughts settled and slowed in such a way that they were more manageable and relaxing. She slept more deeply at night, and the burning sensation that had relentlessly pushed her to ask, discover, and explore grew less persistent and bothersome. Piper found she liked it better this way. As weeks quickly slipped by, Piper settled in further, and this feeling deepened. It was exactly what Piper had reached. It was exactly when Piper had reached the point of almost blissful relaxation, and when everything to finally all make sense, that, as if on cue, things started to go very wrong very quickly, and Conrad was entirely to blame. From the very first day she arrived, Conrad Harrington had refocused all his energy on one single purpose: the demise of Piper McCloud. With unerring accuracy and a dark insight, Conrad systematically targeted Piper to the nth degree and caused her trouble at every turn. First, Piper's homework assignment went inexplicably missing. Then Nurse Toll discovered her bed unmade, even though Piper swore up and down she had made it. In gym class, the rope Piper was climbing broke and she fell to the floor, and then her pen exploded, leaving a large black ink stain on her dress. And that was only what Conrad did in the first week. I wouldn't be surprised if Conrad didn't even have a soul, Piper confided in Violet, after Conrad locked her in a classroom, making her late for lunch. Piper couldn't begin to imagine what perverse satisfaction Conrad derived from orchestrating his malicious pranks. Whether he was motivated by boredom, or he enjoyed causing other people grief, or he just had a black heart, such cruelty was completely outside Piper's range of experience. Piper fought against his onslaught with passive resistance, hoping he would soon tire and find other things to occupy his attention. To all outward appearances, she acted as though Conrad didn't exist, and met all his mischief with calm equanimity. It must be noted that this was easier said than done, and much to Piper's credit, she had ingeniously devised a foolproof way of accomplishing this each and every time, regardless of Conrad's dirty tactics. With great care, Piper had used a ribbon to fasten Joe's wood bird around her neck so that it rested against her heart. The precious wood bird provided her with a link to her parents and her home, giving her the strength, despite anything Conrad happened to be doing, to take the high road. Besides which, she learned her lesson after the art class incident and couldn't risk being expelled. Unfortunately, nothing irked Conrad more, and his fixation was violently inflamed on Piper's seeming indifference and Zen-like acceptance. Conrad first doubled, then tripled efforts, until at last things reached the point of complete intolerability, and even Gandhi himself would have shaken his fist and shouted warlike cries as he pushed Piper to the brink. Move it, fatso! Conrad gave Piper a sharp shove in the corridor on the way to morning class. He pushed her forcefully, throwing her off balance so that her books scattered every which way. Nayland and Ahmed snickered, enjoying the spectacle of Piper crawling on her hands and knees to collect her tangled books. The rest of the kids carefully kept out of the fray, except Violet, who stayed loyally by Piper's side. Don't pay any attention to him, Violet urged Piper. Aren't you supposed to eat like a bird, Fly Girl? Conrad kicked a book out of Piper's reach. You look like a turkey gobbling your breakfast, or a pig, gobble gobble oink oink. It's plain as day that you're green with envy, Piper calmly picked up her last book as her hand instinctively took hold of her woodbird. And green isn't your color, Conrad. Envious of what? You? Conrad laughed. Nayland and Ahmed joined him. I saw you spying on me last night when I was walking with Dr. Hellion. You were trying to listen to us, too. It chaps your big toe knowing Dr. Hellion wants to walk with me and not you. Piper's aim was true, and Conrad flushed in response. Lashing out, he grabbed hold of her arm, holding it so tightly that she would notice bruise marks later on. You're as dumb as a fence post, Piper McCloud. Conrad got into her face, staring her down. Why don't you open your eyes? I see plenty, like how you're always stealing food from Jasper. From what Piper could discern, Conrad seemed to subsist on a diet of plain lettuce leaves and rice, a habit that, in Piper's mind, would turn anyone mean or crazy, and went a long way in explaining his peculiar behavior. While he had no appetite for his own food, he routinely stole food from everyone else, and his victim of choice was Jasper, who was too weak and helpless to defend himself. In case you never heard it, when you take stuff that belongs to a thief. Conrad's lip curled up and his eyes squinted in fury as the morning bell rang. In the mad dash to class, the meanness and madness deep inside Conrad bubbled to the surface and swallowed him whole. By the end of that very day, come what may, Conrad silently vowed that he would break Piper McLeod. You will be pleased to hear that Bella has completely recovered and will be graduating. Professor Mumblebee announced as soon as Piper and Violet were seated. Immediately, an eruption of surprised gasps and whispers rippled throughout the room. Later this afternoon, you will all attend her graduation party, and I expect that you will be on your very, very best behavior. Piper shared a gleeful smile of anticipation with Violet. Since Bella's collapse, Piper had lost count of the number of times she'd asked after her, only to receive the same response. Bella's not feeling well and needs her rest. Piper was overjoyed at the prospect of seeing her again, and when afternoon finally came, she rushed with Violet to the atrium and found that it had been festively decorated with balloons and streamers, and a large sign that read "Good Luck, Bella" in multicolored bright lettering. While waiting for the guest of honor, games were organized and played with much gusto. Graduations were few and far between, and the excitement level was running high. As was often the case when something new and off the ordinary schedule was allowed, which hardly ever happened, the students couldn't quite seem to control themselves. Try as they might, it just proved too difficult for most of them to remember the rules and restrain themselves when there was so much fun and excitement to be had. Needless to say, there were many slip-ups, both big and small. During musical chairs, Myrtle's remarkable speed made her unbeatable, even when she wasn't particularly trying. At the pin, the tail, and the donkey, the blindfold was useless against Smitty's X-ray vision, and he went on to win every single time. Lily reveled in a cat-and-mouse game that consisted of releasing her balloon into the air and teasing it with thoughts of freedom before telekinetically drawing it back down to her hand. Kimber managed to toast all of the marshmallows on the refinement table until the smoke set off the fire sprinkler and put an end to her covert s'mores operation. Then Daisy's underhand toss during the dodgeball game shattered a massive window with such force that glass detonated outward like a bomb, and the kids were thereafter restricted to a game of Twister, which was thought to be far less dangerous and unlikely to result in the sudden death of a student, teacher, innocent bystander, or a combination thereof. As usual, Piper's joy was marred. During the Twister game, Conrad disqualified Piper by kneeing her in the stomach and pushing her off the mat when no one else was looking. Hey, that's cheating! Piper held her stomach winded. So what if it is? What are you going to do about it? Piper stammered, splitting at the seams for an effort it took to restrain herself. No matter which way she turned, she couldn't get away from his nastiness, and her patience was wearing thinner and thin. Piper touched the wood bird, which instantly made her remember to take a deep breath and count to 10. Just like I thought, you'll do nothing, Conrad looked ready to explode. Violet grabbed Piper by the arm and pulled her away from Conrad. Piper, come on, Dr. Hines just brought Bella. She's over here. Violet pointed to where Bella was, surrounded by the others, and Piper was startled to see that Bella looked nothing like she remembered. For starters, her long golden hair had been cut short, and her bright yellow uniform had been exchanged for a pair of drab jeans and a gray jersey. She also looked very tired. We'll miss you, Bella, Lily said with genuine affection. It was impossible not to like Bella. Will you write? What are you going to color up first? Hi, Bella, Piper squeezed through the group to get closer. Remember me, Piper? Bella took a step away and smiled, unsure. Come on, Bella, just do one more rainbow, Lily begged. Yeah, and make it a big one with every color you got. Bella looked between the faces in confusion. I don't understand. You know, Bella, your colors, Smitty persisted. Just once more. Piper could tell that Bella was genuinely flustered. Whatever damage Conrad had done to Bella, it was clear that she hadn't completely recovered from it. Yet one more reason that Piper could add to her already long list of why Conrad was trouble and needed to be avoided at all costs. I don't know what you're talking about, Bella stammered, causing Dr. Hellion to come protectively to her side. I'm sorry, but it's time for Bella to leave now. Her parents are expecting her. Dr. Hellion eased Bella away from the throng and towards the elevator. Does Bella seem right to you? Piper whispered to Violet. You think she's just fooling about her colors because Dr. Hillion's here? Violet shrugged. She didn't smile once. You see that? Not once. When I first saw her, she wasn't able to last more than a minute without bursting into a smile that lit up the sky. It's like she's not the same person anymore. As Dr. Hellion led Bella onto the elevator, Piper pushed forward once again, with a last-ditch effort at reaching her. Since Bella's absence, Jasper had taken care of Princess Madrigal, and almost overnight, and even the stalk that had been severed had regrown. Amazed at the plant's miraculous recovery, the kids had anticipated Bella's joy at seeing how it was thriving. Hey, hey, Bella! If you want, I can go fetch Princess Madrigal for you. Piper offered, hopefully. She's got a new shoot pushing up, and you can show her off to your folks. Princess Madrigal? Something passed behind Bella's eyes, and then she flushed. No, no, thank you. You can take care of her for me. Piper gasped. Bella didn't want to see her flower? But elevator commenced, Dr. Hellion commanded. Bye, Bella! Don't forget about us! Come back and see us soon! Bella raised her hand to wave, but the doors of the elevator closed before she was able to complete the gesture. Rushing around to the other side of the elevator, the kids were able to see Bella through the glass as she went up, up, and finally disappeared to the surface above them. It was the last any of them would ever see of Miss Bella Lovely. Sure wish I got to see my parents. Must be nice to go home. All right. All right, then. We've got more cake here that needs eating. Back to the party. Nurse Toll guided Lily and Jasper back to the refreshment tables. After a respectful moment, the rest of the kids returned to their games. Kimber found another marshmallow to covertly toast, and Naylin and Ahmed reverted to beating each other over the head with balloons. Only Piper remained with her eyes looking upward, her thoughts consuming her. Bella didn't want Princess Madrigal. She loved that plant. It didn't make sense that she would leave it behind. Piper's deep confusion was so acute that she let her guard down and became oblivious to the people and events around her. Conrad, who had been carefully observing Piper, realized that this moment was exactly the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Piper's distracted confusion made her into a sitting duck, which was just what he needed to complete his plan. With silent stealth, Conrad crept forward, then quickly darted around to Piper's side. Oblivious, Piper's gaze remained upward, positioning himself just so. Conrad prepared himself mentally and physically, and then struck like a cobra. He lashed out and grabbed at Piper's chest. Ah! Piper yelped, harshly jolted back into reality. Instinctively, she jumped away, but Conrad moved faster. With a violent tug, Conrad broke the ribbon around Piper's neck and wrenched her wood bird free. It felt to Piper as though Conrad had ripped out her very heart. Her precious wood bird, no larger than a golf ball, with a monetary value no greater than $1.50 to Conrad in all the world, had a meaning and resonance held deep in the very fiber of her DNA. That little piece of wood had been nourished by the soil of her home, where her kith and kin patiently awaited her return. It was a physical piece of her pa's love, a tiny sliver of the safety, love, and belonging, without which she was suddenly cut adrift with no link to her past or key to her future. She needed it like she needed oxygen. This is a piece of garbage, Conrad sneered, twirling the bird out of Piper's reach. Now, Conrad, or I swear by the stars that all. Piper's face was red with fury, and her breath was coming in gasps. You keep saying that, Fly Girl, but you don't do anything. Do you know why? Because you can't. You're useless. Swinging it around his head, Conrad pumped his arm, causing the bird to move faster and faster until it became a blur in all of the whirling. Conrad, stop that! Piper tried to command Conrad, but her voice sounded more like she was begging him, which of course was the truth. Impervious to Piper's pleas, Conrad bided his time until all eyes were on the bird, and then he flung it at the waste disposal chute. His aim could not have been more accurate. The tiny bird neatly flew through the air before Piper's horror-filled eyes. It was swallowed whole, disappearing forever into the mouth of the filthy pit, and that was Piper's breaking point. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12. Ah! A furious scream rang out, raising the small hairs on the back of the neck of anyone who had the ears to hear it. Piper catapulted herself at Conrad. Unprepared for the ferocity of Piper's attack, Conrad crumpled and the two fell in a tangle, wrestling furious heap on the floor. Fight, Naylin gleefully announced, or maybe it was Ahmed. Fight, repeated Ahmed, or maybe Naylin. Arms, legs, teeth, and hair went flying. It took Nurse Toll and Professor Mumblebee and the attending agent on duty, not to mention all of their considerable strength and tactical effort, to separate the two, and even when she was firmly restrained by the agent's grasp, Piper was still swinging. I want my bird! Get it back! McLeod, Harrington, Nurse Toll panted between furious and terrified gasps. Dr. Hellion's office, now! During the elevator ride on the fourth floor, Piper's eyes threw daggers at Conrad, and all appearances suggested that not only couldn't Conrad have cared less, but that he was smugly congratulating himself on a job well done. Nurse Toll deposited Conrad on one side of Dr. Hellion's waiting room, and Piper on the other, and sat with them until he was sure that Piper was calm enough to restrain herself. When the meal bell rang, Nurse Toll left them with strict instructions not to move a muscle, or speak, or fight, or do anything else that would get on his last remaining nerve until Dr. Hellion's return. What does it feel like to have something so precious taken from you? Conrad taunted as soon as Nurse Toll left the room. A smile was playing on his lips, and Piper's hand had an almost irrepressible desire to wipe it clean off his face. You think your bird will burn fast or slow? I think slowly, Conrad baited. They both knew that the disposal system employed suction to draw all waste through tubing to the incinerator room on the fourth floor, where it was burned once a day. The incinerator starting in 20 minutes. Suddenly, Piper sat bolt upright in her chair, as a fragile hope welled in her. If Conrad was right, when was a genius not right, and the garbage hadn't yet been incinerated, it meant her bird was still safe, and maybe, just maybe, she had time to get it. Ma always says, where there's a will, there's a way. I'm sure willin', so there must be a way. 1 second. Me? Passionately swearing to herself that she was going to have her bird back, Piper leapt to her feet. But the real question is, if a wood bird burns in a garbage heap and no one hears it or sees it, does it really burn? Conrad mused. Ah, stuff a dirty sock in it, Conrad. Piper made for the door. You'll never make it in time. The incinerator is on the other side of the testing lab, and the lab doors have 4 security safeguards. Conrad scoffed. It's more likely you'll get struck by lightning than get past those doors. Then I'll be real careful of that lightning once I'm on the other side of them. Piper didn't waste another moment of her precious time on Conrad and slipped out the waiting room and onto the corridor with a plan. All she had to do was find the laboratory doors, and to do that she followed the garbage ducts. Several breathless minutes later, and after many wrong turns, Piper arrived at 2 doors, painted bright red and labeled Maximum Security, Experimental Testing Laboratory. Sure enough, they had 4 different security measures, just like Conrad said they would. Keep your wits about you, Piper coached herself. She tried fiddling with the security keypad and the screen, but it had no effect. In desperation, she banged the side of it, hoping to shock the system into releasing the doors. It did no good. Hey, Moo, grab the dolly. They'll be heavy, a gruff voice shouted from behind the doors. Piper ducked out of sight, and a moment later the red door swung open, and a fat man, wearing a utility uniform, waited impatiently on the threshold. He tapped his foot until Moo appeared, wheeling a dolly. Quit with the rushing. Every week's the same, Jessie. The new specimens will be ready by 5:30, like always. You get yourself all hyper over nothing. Moo, who's even fatter than Jessie, had a small stick dangling from his lips. That he pressed this way and that out of some sort of nervous habit. Chronically bored and seriously ill-tempered, the 2 men lumbered through their well-worn routine in a state that most closely compared to sleepwalking. It took very little effort on Piper's part to grab for the red door and slip inside, once they ambled down the hall. As the red doors closed behind her, Piper was amazed to discover that the testing laboratory covered over half the entire 4th level, rows upon rows of scientific experiments. There were more scientific doohickeys and whatchamacallits than a person could lay a name to. With no time to dawdle, she quickly located the waste tubes coming from a nearby garbage chute and followed their path through the laboratory. Several rows in, Piper's eyes were suddenly caught by a red rose, fastened between the tongs of a specimen stand. She stopped dead in her tracks. I remember you! She'd seen that rose when she first arrived, and it had bitten a scientist's nose. To test her theory, Piper very carefully extended her hand toward a petal, and Shirl's pulled back to reveal a small mouth with teeth hidden inside. Brrr, the rose growled. Piper quickly pulled her hand away as the rose snapped at her, biting the air. You have yourself a real temper. Grrr. The growling rose was perfectly prepared to bite at anyone who might poke or sniff it. It was gloriously in full bloom, and its red petals were positioned in front of a spray gun-like machine. Suddenly the machine whirled to life, and a black mist shot out, squarely hitting the flower and also landing on Piper's forearm. The rose coughed, spitting out the foul chemical, and Piper found herself coughing too, as the skin on her arm started to painfully burn. That's smart! Piper plucked up a nearby cloth to wipe the chemical off of her skin. Ooh, ah, ah, ow! It was a small noise, but the sort of sound you would make at the back of your throat if you were in pain. It was unmistakably coming from the rose. When only the very smallest touch of the black stuff had burned her own skin, Piper could only imagine its effects on a delicate rose. Despite its tough pretense, the rose was suffering a slow and painful death. Here, little fellow, let me help you. Piper reached out with the cloth to get at the black coating on the red petals. Grrr. If you'd hold still a minute, I'll help you some. I can't do anything if you're biting me. The rose was unconvinced, perhaps because it was yet to experience a human hand that wasn't interfering with it in some way. At the same time, it was so weakened by the chemical that it didn't have much fight in it, and after a short struggle, it finally relented to Piper's ministrations. She carefully cleaned off the wilting petals and then showered the rose off with water. The rose shook itself gratefully. Why are they spraying this stuff on you? Piper moved the rose a safe distance from the chemical. Grrr. Piper was sure that Dr. Hellion would want to know about this. Obviously, Moo and Jessie were up to no good, and the first chance she got, she was going to expose them and put things right. In the meantime, she was running out. In the meantime, time was running out, and Piper had to get to the incinerator. Breaking into a run to make up for lost time, Piper said goodbye to the rose, and sped past several more rows until her sight was arrested by a turtle with a lead block stuck on its head. The block was so heavy that it was slowly crushing the life out of the turtle, and its legs were flailing about helplessly. What in the name of Jehoshaphat happened to you? Piper stopped dead in her tracks, confronted by a critical decision. If she helped the turtle, there was no way she could get to the incinerator in time. If she left the turtle until later, Moo and Jessie would likely return, and she wouldn't be able to do anything about it without being caught. Gosh darn it all! Piper's heart couldn't leave the turtle to suffer. She was simply going to have to find a way to live without her little wood bird. Once again, Conrad had seen to it that he got his way. Hey, little fella. Looks like you got the whole world on your back. I reckon you'd appreciate a little bit of help. Piper unlatched the cage and angled her arm so that her fingers could get at the metal hook that held the lead block in place. Pushing this way and that, she finally managed to snap it free, and the heavy block tumbled away. That's better, isn't it? The turtle happily stretched its legs out and was able to get to his feet. Piper stepped back to admire it, when suddenly the turtle began to leap. It was the fastest, springiest turtle, and the very next thing Piper knew, the turtle leapt right out of its cage. Hey, get back here! Piper jumped after the turtle, but it was leaping 10 to 15 feet in the air. Before she could count to 2, it was across the room and had leapt out a window that opened to the central atrium. Dr. Hellion's not going to like that. Piper turned away in dismay, only to discover that her actions were becoming carefully observed by a little black cricket. He was peering at her from behind a glass container and looked to be the exact same cricket that Piper had been introduced to on the elevator. With the same soulful eyes, his antennae moved forward just as before when she crouched down to look at him. So that's where you've been hiding. Piper was excited to see him again. This time the little black cricket didn't come to the side of the cage to greet her. Piper soon saw why. A gooey, glue-like substance had been splattered all across his legs, binding them together and fixing them to the cage. The cricket was courageously waging a battle against the goo by thrusting his legs with all his might. Unfortunately, the more he fought, the more the sticky glue was spreading across his body. Hey, little guy, remember me? Hold on there. You keep moving like that, and you'll be covered up in this stuff. Here, I'll help you out. Hold still now. Piper opened the cage and plucked the cricket out onto her hand. There, see, it's not so bad. Piper held him at eye level, and girl and cricket regarded each other. You need a little bit of help, maybe. The cricket gazed at Piper unblinkingly. Piper found some nearby Q-tips and used them to absorb most of the chemical. Who'd go and do something like that? It's not right. It's just not right. Grateful for the assistance, the black cricket trustingly remained still and allowed Piper to daub away much of his grief. Piper shook her head at the thought of someone hurting such innocent and beautiful creatures. Delicately cupping her hand around the cricket, Piper was determined to bring him back to show Dr. Hellion what was going on. This laboratory was nothing short of a torture chamber. From her position alone, Piper was forced to witness one atrocity after another. A purple swan swam in a pool of bleach. An 8-armed monkey had all but 2 of his arms in a straitjacket, and a walking daffodil was leashed to a stake to keep it planted. The more Piper saw, the less she wanted to see, and the more it was painfully obvious that many terrible things were going on in the testing laboratory. Such torture and inhumane treatment of any living creature was hard for Piper to stomach or comprehend. Bang, bang! A loud thumping sound startled Piper, and she ducked down out of sight, convinced that Moo and Jessie were about to catch her red-handed. The little black cricket fidgeted about nervously. Bang, bang! The source of the noise was a small room at the end of the row where Piper was crouched. The more she listened, the more it was apparent that the noise was something somewhat unusual. The sort of noise that wasn't of human origin. Bang! Crash! The door to the room was cracked open, and Piper crept forward and peeked inside. Unfortunately, the room was pitch black, making it impossible for her to see anything. Bang! Bang! The trembling hand, Piper quietly pushed the heavy door open inch by inch. Light from the laboratory spilled in and cut a swath down the room in direct proportion to the opening of the door. Bang! Bang! Piper held her breath. Against the back of the wall of the examining room was a large beast cloaked in the blackness of the shadow. A trembling moved up and down Piper's legs, and her breath came in terrified gasps. She could hear the creature breathe, too, and through the darkness see its eyes watching her. Howdy! Tentatively moving one foot in front of the other, she took one step into the room, and then another. Silence. What you doing in here? One step more. Silence. You want to come out of that corner? It's mighty dark. Me, I don't like the dark all that much. I'd turn a light on for you if I could find it. By this point, Piper was in the middle of the room, halfway between the beast and the door. She dared not go any further. She could feel it watching and sizing her up. Bang! Bang! Piper flinched, expecting the beast to lash out. In actuality, it was shifting its position and uncoiling its long neck. Then, slowly, the beast stretched that neck out toward the small, trembling girl in the center of the room. As soon as its head hit the shaft of light, Piper saw that the beast was actually a beautiful silver giraffe. He was covered in dirt and looked terribly thin and tired, but there was no mistaking his regal beauty. He stretched his neck out and came face to face with Piper. You've got yourself in an awful fix, don't ya? Piper's eyes adjusted to the darkness so she could see that thick and ghastly chains were binding the giraffe's body to the floor and cutting into his flesh. His long legs were cramped and arranged at odd angles. The banging noises came from his attempts to get comfortable. The once proud and beautiful creature was broken and beaten, and Piper inwardly raged with ferocity at the terrible injustice. She wished she could break the chains with her bare hands and free him that very instant. Instead, she used her hand to gently stroke the giraffe's head. Hey there. He leaned into her touch, hungry for the gentleness of a kind word and gesture. Piper brushed the silver patches on his head. They were so smooth that it felt like stroking velvet. You're so soft, beautiful. She caressed the giraffe's delicate base, and he held still, lest he miss even a moment of her sweet and gentle attention. While there was no way for Piper to know it, her kindness was the first he had felt in a long time, and it took his mind off of the agony of cramped and crumpled legs, and of the heavy chains it held him to the ground. His sad heart was lifted, and the room mysteriously filled with a flickering light that grew brighter and steadier. Initially, Piper thought the overhead light of the room had been turned on, until she realized that the giraffe's silver spots were literally glowing like spotlights. Holy moly, you're like a giant light bulb! The beacon inside the giraffe, activated by Piper's kind-heartedness, was blinding. Don't you worry yourself. I'll get some help for you, and you'll be out of here in a jiffy. As soon as Dr. Hellion hears about this, she won't stand for it. You just wait and see. A gruff male voice came from the lab just outside of the giraffe's room. Set up the new experiments between the insects and the plants. Jessie and Moo had returned. Piper quickly rushed to the door and eased it closed so that she could peep out without being seen. Moo was pushing a dolly full of specimen containers holding harried-looking spiders the size of golf balls. As they crawled about, they rapidly changed color from fluorescent green to orange to yellow, and then back again. Piper was on the verge of being discovered. There's no telling what Moo and Jessie might do if they found her. Rushing back to the giraffe, she gave him one last pat. I'll be back, you hear? I'm not going to leave you like this. Just you hold on. Then, as quiet as a mouse, Piper slid out of the giraffe's room, crouching low and out of sight. With a little black cricket in one hand, Piper scuttled from one workstation to the next, making a beeline for the red doors, only 2 rows shy of success. The red doors came bursting open, and a team of scientists entered. Thinking fast, Piper ducked out of sight and remained hidden under a table as the bevy of scientists stopped inches away from her position and conferred. Specimen 4-2 Alpha is still not responding to treatment protocols. Critical's trials show no improvement or any change whatsoever. A bald scientist smartly reported in an overly educated nasal voice. This is a compiled list of the specimen's pertinent data, a second scientist continued. Note here the use of electric shock treatment, chemical cocktails, hydrotherapy, and of course physical restraint. None provided any satisfactorily significant results. Piper froze. The last voice was low but familiar, and it sent a chill down Piper's spine. Her line of sight was obstructed by several white lab coats, and she craned for better view. Exterminated then. It's unfortunate, but we can't dedicate resources to life forms who resist rehabilitation. Once again, it was that same familiar voice that spoke. It was not only familiar, but unmistakable. Piper knew it was all too well. But even so refused to believe what her senses were telling her. 2 separate teams have been dispatched to capture additional species today. The soft and gentle voice continued. Uncooperative specimens must be destroyed to make room, by whatever means necessary. The lab coats parted and Piper saw. No! It was a silent scream, the sort that your soul yells when a piece of it is crushed and dies. No! As always, Letitia Hellion's face was breathtakingly beautiful. She was the very picture of composure. Even as she ordered a nation of exquisite and delicate life forms helped under her care, she did so with the same ease you might ask for more sugar in your tea. I've compiled a list of specimens, Dr. Hellion handed out pages to the scientists who nodded their heads and took notes, that must be collected and terminated. Let's begin with specimen 4 Alpha 2. Dr. Hellion led the way and the group followed. Piper wondered what had happened to all the oxygen in the room because none of it was getting to her lungs. How was this possible? Dr. Hellion was nothing short of an angel, or at least she looked like an angel. But would an angel use words like destroy and terminate? Did angels bind giraffes, slowly kill roses, and torture crickets? Dr. Hellion's outwardly beautiful surface had deceived Piper. She'd believed in her, loved her, and had placed her very life in her hands, and now, God help her, she was at her mercy. If Dr. Hellion was capable of such things, then what was in store for Piper? What terrible things would Dr. Hellion do to her and the other kids? And yet, despite everything, a part of Piper wouldn't believe what her senses told her. The tender, dreaming part of her held out hope that she was wrong and mistaken, and that Dr. Hellion was the savior and presented herself to be. Dr. Hellion came to a stop at the lab station where specimen 4-2 Alpha should have been waiting. But specimen 4-2 Alpha was not waiting. Instead, the group found an open case with white chemicals in the bottom of it. Dr. Hellion immediately looked to the team leader for an explanation. But, the scientist blathered, looking around the experiment station. He was right here an hour ago. What's the description? What's the physical description, Dr. Fields? Another scientist took the chart from Dr. Fields and flipped through it. It's the Voculus Romalia Microptera. Dr. Fields quickly explained, scrambling about the station, easily mistaken for the common field cricket. Shaken from her stunned trance, Piper looked at the black cricket sitting in the palm of her hand and swallowed hard. This is not good, Piper quickly realized. Dr. Fields, the specimen has been released, Dr. Hellion stated the obvious. But, Dr. Fields sputtered, it's never happened before. Be that as it may, I'm alerting security. Dr. Hellion flipped open her phone. Agent, we have a situation in Dr. Helene paused in mid-sentence as her eye rested upon a single stray Q-tip. Very carefully, she lifted it between two slender fingers and turned it around. A hushed silence fell over all the gathered scientists as the full implication of the Q-tip claim became clear to them. Ah, yes, agent, correction. We've got a red alert and a possible intruder on level 4. I want all surveillance tapes, and Piper didn't know exactly what a red alert was, but she knew that it wasn't good and that the place was soon going to be crawling with agents. She had to act fast or be tracked. A steady team of lab personnel had been moving in and out of the red door since Dr. Helene's arrival, preventing an escape without being seen. Piper slid the little black cricket into her pocket ever so quietly whispered to herself, I'm as light as a cloud, as free as a bird, I'm part of the sky, and I can fly. When the tingling started, she reached on top of the table above her head and grasped the first heavy object she came upon. Without so much as a glance at it, she tossed it into the opposite side of the room. Bang! A glass beaker exploded, scaring the science team out of their wits. Taking advantage of the distraction, Piper leapt across the aisle and then dashed across the room until she came to the panel of frosted windows that overlooked the atrium, a dizzying number of stories far, far below. With wild abandon, Piper threw herself out an open window. Dr. Helene turned on a dime. She saw something out of the corner of her eye. That much was certain. She ran to the window and looked down, then up, then to the side. She saw nothing. Agent, I want the exact current location of Piper McCloud. Dr. Helene hadn't gotten to be head of the facility for no good reason. She knew someone had to be in the lab. In my office? Thank you. It required every ounce of Piper's energy to fly into Dr. Helene's office through the open window. Her body felt like it weighed 100 million pounds. She hadn't flown in months, and it was almost as though she couldn't remember how. Like the birds, I will fly. She said it over and over again. I'm a part of the sky, and I can fly. Panting and puffing and pushing, her feet touched down, and her first thought was to call for help. The telephone was sitting in plain view on Dr. Helene's desk, and Piper immediately reached out for it and dialed home. It must have been hours before the phone began to ring. Come on, Ma, pick up! They rarely received any phone calls from one mouth to the next at the farm, and it would probably catch Mother off guard to hear the unfamiliar ringing. That is, if she was close enough to hear the phone, close enough to the phone to hear it at all. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, 4 rings. Please hear it. Please be there. Piper expected Dr. Helene to burst through the door at any moment. 10 rings, 11 rings, 12 rings. Hello? Betty McCloud sat on the other end of the phone, and Piper almost wept with joy. Ma! Click! The phone went dead. Piper gasped and looked down to find a finger rest resolutely pressing the disconnect button on the phone. That finger belonged to Conrad Harrington III. What are you doing? Don't you know what's going on here? Conrad didn't react, but instead took the handset away from Piper and, with quick movements, took it apart. A moment later, he plucked a small round disc the size of a button from the earpiece. He held it out so that Piper could see it. Bugged. Piper looked at Conrad as though seeing him for the first time, and in truth, this was the first time he was actually letting her see him. Everything about him was different. He looked taller and more confident, and nothing like the whiny, mean child who had been making her life miserable for the last few weeks. But, shh, don't speak, just listen. Conrad reached into his pocket and pulled out Piper's little wooden bird, silently handing it to her. Piper clutched the precious wooden bird to her heart, and tears obscured her vision. Was nothing she knew or saw real? With her own 2 eyes, she'd watched Conrad throw her bird down the garbage chute. But how? I created a replica. Conrad quickly explained, putting the reassembled phone in place. I took your bird with one hand and threw the replica in the rubbish with the other. Piper's mouth opened, but there were no words. There isn't time. Dr. Helene is on her way. She'll suspect you, but she'll have no proof. I was watching your progress on the surveillance cameras and know everything. I've done what I can, I've done what I can, but you must follow my lead. Make sure the cricket stays in your pocket. If she catches you or it, all will be lost. Just do what I tell you. That was when Piper knew that Conrad knew everything, had always known, that he was actually trying to protect her and that they needed each other. And that was when Piper McCloud's greatest enemy became her only ally. As fate would have it, Piper was given less than 4 seconds to retroactively relive all of the events of her last months in a staggering journey that reordered by 180 degrees everything she'd accepted as real and true to be fake and lies, so that her head was spinning and her knees were shaking, and she no longer knew which way was up or down. It was that precise moment when the door to the office burst open, and Dr. Letitia Hellion told and fixed her piercing eyes upon Piper's white, trembling face. And thus ends chapter 12. Ah, so things are not quite what they seem. Yes. Yeah, thanks for joining me for this time. We'll see you tomorrow for the continuation of what happens next. Bye, guys.